Hi, I'm Tori and I am a doctor of physical therapy who specializes in pelvic dysfunction, which means I treat things that can go wrong around the pelvis. However, it also means that I have experience in the world of Western medicine, not only as a consumer, but also as a provider. And I am also a person who has successfully healed from 3 chronic, mysterious conditions and who is so close to healing from a 4th by stepping outside of Western medicine and relying a little more heavily on more alternative therapies, which means that I do have some experience in the world of alternative medicine as a consumer. It is my firm belief that there are some incredible healing aspects and interventions both in Western medicine and alternative medicine, and I think that true holistic healing observes what both spaces have to offer and then chooses the appropriate interventions from either or both spaces depending on the individual who is seeking care. However, in the same way that both of these spaces do have some wonderful healing interventions available, they are also both for-profit industries, which means that they inherently have pitfalls where money is placed above safety, health, and everything else. And in order to navigate either or both of those spaces successfully, I think it's important to be aware of those pitfalls. I was actually inspired to make this video because of a recent ongoing conversation that I am having with a dear friend of mine who reached out to express his frustrations with alternative medicine. And I think that his points are really important to understand as a consumer. So with his permission, I will be using some of his words in this video. As I mentioned, I think that the pitfalls of both Western and alternative medicine connect with them being for-profit industries. And the last point that I wanted to make before I share more specific insights is that I think that the experience in either space can be greatly altered for better or for worse depending on your provider. I've mentioned before on this channel how important I think it is to try and have compassion for providers, how important it is to remember that these providers are people operating within a for-profit industry that sometimes forces them to see an ungodly number of patients so that they can meet impossible productivity standards so that they can make the most money for their corporation. And that affects different providers, that affects different people differently. Some people become robotic in order to protect their mental and emotional energy. Others try to treat all people with the same blueprint because they want to be helpful, but they know that they don't have the time to create actual individualized plans of care, and still others will attempt to be giving of their mental and emotional energy to each patient and actually try to create individualized plans of care for everybody, and that leads ultimately to burnout and compassion fatigue. This is why I always preach about radical self-reliance when it comes to healing. Doing your own research, questioning your providers, really trying to understand your own unique body, and doing your best to be an active participant in your healing. Doing your best to assume the role of a team member where you are on the same team as your provider instead of assuming a more passive role, which can sometimes lend itself to the more hero-victim-esque relationship that can sometimes develop between a patient and a provider. So, having stated the importance of the patient-provider relationship, let's talk a little bit more about the pitfalls in Western and alternative medicine. I think that the pitfalls of Western medicine are a little more obvious in that they are discussed more often, and I think that my friend did a really good job of succinctly listing them. So number one, an overfocus on pharmaceuticals. This is something that I have talked about before, but just to make it really clear, I am not against pharmaceuticals. I think that they can be life-giving, life-changing, and life-saving. What I do take issue with is their overprescription, the lack of patient education that comes with their prescription, and the fact that they're prescribed so quickly when other more natural lifestyle interventions that could be equally, if not more effective, haven't even been trialed. 2 would be a poor appreciation for psychosocial factors that can influence your healing. And I do think that these factors, especially the psychological factors, are getting a little more attention nowadays, which I am really grateful for. However, I have noticed that the pendulum is now swinging heavily in the opposite direction, where Western providers will tell a patient that they have anxiety when they do in fact have a biological issue going on. A third pitfall of Western medicine that many doctors aren't good at good patient relationships or communication. I do think that that is unfortunately true. In fact, one of my biggest pet peeves is when providers speak in medical language that they know that their patient probably doesn't fully understand and effectively speak over their patient. And I do try to have compassion and understanding for why providers would speak to their patients in that manner. However, sometimes it does feel like a bizarre either power play or time play, a power play where the provider is trying to use the medical language in order to establish authority and push whatever intervention it is onto the patient, or a time play in that the provider simply doesn't have the time to actually explain in layman's terms what they think is going on, so they use the medical language to get the point across so that they can move on to the next patient, almost like a doing your due diligence and then you move on to the next patient. I think it's an Albert Einstein quote, I'm not sure, but whoever said this, I agree wholeheartedly. The quote is that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. And I don't say that to imply that you as the patient have the cognitive ability of a 6-year-old. I say that to underscore that medical language is quite literally another language. It is a foreign secondary language. So don't ever hesitate to ask clarification questions, to actually record, bring your phone in and record the appointment so that you can decode it later, or have someone on the phone come to the appointment with you who is medically literate, who can translate what just happened for you, either during the appointment or afterwards. You always, always, always deserve to understand your plan of care and anything that has anything to do with your body. And the 4th pitfall of Western medicine, that medical research is biased towards things that are profitable. And that's just a tough truth. I think that the opioid epidemic is a really great example of this phenomenon. It's hard to offer any sort of real solution other than awareness of this truth. And I don't mean to encourage you to be cynically skeptical of all pharmaceuticals so much as I mean to encourage a healthy skepticism, to do your own research, to recognize who's funding the research that you're reading, and to marry that sort of healthy skepticism with a healthy curiosity, a healthy open mind when it comes to understanding pharmaceuticals and whether or not they'd be a good intervention for you. And those are some of the pitfalls that are worthy of your awareness as you navigate Western medicine. What my friend brought up that I don't think as many people are aware of is that alternative medicine as an industry is incredible at marketing. In part of our conversation, he said to me, they, talking about alternative medicine, correctly point out problems with the medical establishment in the United States, but many alternative providers are guilty of the same or worse. This marketing technique is really, really effective because you, as the consumer, have been validated in your correct observations of the pitfalls of Western medicine. But what you may not realize is that because you've been made to feel so seen and heard and understood, that you've been primed to accept or purchase whatever this alternative provider is selling as the solution to your problem. And again, this is not me saying that all alternative providers are evil salesmen or that all alternative providers are bad. I don't believe that either of those things are true. I've worked with some incredible alternative providers whose services I would recommend, and I have a lot of compassion for providers in either space. However, as a consumer, it is important that you are aware of this business model and that you are aware that this sort of psychological priming can cloud your judgment. Let's now unpack the statement that alternative providers are guilty of the same or worse. So I want to take the overfocus on pharmaceuticals and the medical research biasing things that are profitable pitfalls of Western medicine and parallel those same pitfalls in alternative medicine, but instead of pharmaceuticals, we will be talking about supplements. In the same way that some Western providers overfocus on pharmaceuticals, I think that some alternative providers overfocus on supplements. And I hold the same view of supplements as I do of pharmaceuticals. I am not against supplements. I use supplements, and I think that supplements can be life-changing, life-giving, and life-saving. However, I do take issue with their overprescription, with the lack of patient education that often accompanies their prescription, and how quickly they're prescribed when other more natural lifestyle changes or even other more natural supplements exist that could be equally or more effective and they haven't even been trialed. Sorry about that, my battery died. But what I was going to say is that what I think is important to understand about supplements is that they are essentially unregulated drugs, and I think that they deserve the same attention and respect from both providers and patients as their regulated counterparts. The supplement industry is a billion-dollar industry with very little regulation, and like most billion-dollar industries, that lends itself to prioritizing profit over safety, efficacy, and everything else. For example, the two regulatory powers that be here in the United States are the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Technically, the FTC should regulate the marketing of supplements and their health claims, but they lean heavily on the FDA's determination of whether or not said health claims are supported, and the FDA has very little power over determining the safety and efficacy of supplements until enough people are injured from said supplement. And in the early 90s, after some 30+ people died after taking a certain supplement, Congress attempted to change this law. However, the billion-dollar supplement industry not only created celebrity-endorsed commercials urging consumers to write to Congress opposing this law, but also gave a lot of money to Republican Senator Orrin Hatch and Democratic Senator Tom Harkin, who both ended up co-sponsoring a bill to deregulate the supplement industry, as my friend so eloquently put it, for profit reasons at the expense of consumer safety. And there is the supplement industry, much like the pharmaceutical industry, biasing profit over safety, efficacy, and everything else. Does that mean that you shouldn't take supplements or that you shouldn't listen to your alternative provider's advice when it comes to taking supplements? No. In fact, my earliest YouTube video was all about a supplement that was changing and continues to change my life, which is finally getting some recognition from Western medicine. But anyway, what it does mean is that it's important that you are aware that the supplement industry is driven by profit, that it isn't well regulated, that it can effectively buy congressmen and providers, just like the pharmaceutical industry did with opioids, and that supplements, much like drugs, can have short and long-term side effects. And this all again boils down to radical self-reliance. Do your research. Understand what ingredients are in a supplement that you're taking, especially if there's more than one ingredient. And be wary of supplement protocols that cost you hundreds of dollars per month that are prescribed to you without any sort of tests or blood draws that would indicate that that kind of intervention is actually necessary for you and your unique body. And just to quickly touch on the other two pitfalls of Western medicine and how they parallel pitfalls in alternative medicine. So the poor appreciation of psychosocial factors. I do think that that is probably provider specific, which does mean that it's at least partially specific to the pressures that are being placed on that provider by his or her corporation. So just remember that alternative providers exist within business structures, just like Western providers, which means that they can succumb to the same problematic behaviors. And finally, the many doctors are bad at good patient relationships and communication. I do echo what I said earlier about medical language and its relationship to power plays and time plays, but I also think that the real catch in alternative medicine specifically is that sometimes you are made to feel that the relationship is a really good one and that the communication is effective and clear. But the medical language and the diagnoses that are being so well explained to you aren't actually founded in any sort of science. And that's okay. Science doesn't know everything. Sometimes it takes science a while to catch up and understand that something is true when it's been true for a long time, and sometimes science is wrong. But knowing that is important so that you can practice actual informed consent and determine whether or not you as a patient are okay moving forward, for example, treating a diagnosis that isn't founded in any actual science. Look, human bodies are brilliant and mysterious and individual, and attempting to understand a unique body takes nuance. Look for that nuance, that humility, in your provider. Neither camp, Western or alternative, knows everything about the human body through the lens of health or dysfunction. And there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all treatment, and any provider who guarantees that what they're selling will work no matter what is lying, knowingly or unknowingly. I love what my friend wrote to me, and I'm going to share his words with you. He said, "I think that any medical practitioner has a moral responsibility to be honest about the epistemological status of any diagnosis and treatment. Given how much we don't know, this means that humility is an important part of practicing medicine responsibly. We, as patients, have limited time and money, so it's important for us to prioritize those resources on the care which is most likely to succeed and the least likely to cause harm." So, as I've said before, when it comes to healing and when it comes to navigating either Western or alternative medicine, rely radically on yourself, embrace trial and error, trust your intuition, really work on cultivating that relationship with your body, and trust in your body's innate ability to heal. On that note, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down and let me know what I can do to improve my content in the future. Please feel free to comment absolutely anything down below. Feedback, content suggestions, questions you have, really anything. I do try really hard to read and respond to all of my comments. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram, and finally, if you want to see more content from me, please do consider subscribing to the channel. I make videos not only about life things like today's video, but also about pelvic things. Thank you so much again for watching. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.